Welcome to the Deep Dive. We unpack the sources you bring us, trying to get to the core insights. Weight loss. It's this journey so many people are on, right? And often the story is all about willpower or maybe the latest quick fix. It can be really frustrating. You often end up feeling like you failed somehow. But today we're diving into a really different way of thinking about it, something that pushes back on those common ideas. We're exploring the work of Dan Hollis, specifically his approach to semaglutide laid out in his manifesto and FAQs. Our mission here is to unpack this view. It reframes weight loss, you see, not just as a drug thing or a discipline test, but as something deeper, a human process, an emotional one. We want to pull out the surprising bits that challenge how we usually think.
Exactly. And we're going to try and go beyond just the surface level. Because what's really interesting in Hollis's stuff is how he ties it all together. Biology, our emotions, and what actually leads to change that lasts. We'll explore why it's different, this approach, and what it really involves day to day.
Okay, let's get into it. Hollis's core idea, right at the start, it sounds simple, but it's huge. This is not a drug journey. It's a human one. Right. He keeps saying semaglutide is a tool, a powerful one, yeah, sure, but it only works if you get what it's really doing, which is changing how your brain thinks about hunger, about feeling full, about reward even.
And he describes it in some interesting ways, calls it a signal or a pause button, maybe even a reset. He points out, most places might just give you the drug and say, good luck. But Hollis warns that without structure, without support, this powerful thing can actually create more confusion even while it lowers appetite. The real insight isn't just, oh, I'm less hungry. It's recognizing this temporary window, this mental quiet most people haven't felt before. And that quiet, that pause, that's the real chance to build new habits.
Right. So if it's not just the drug, what is it then? And this is where he really takes on a big assumption. He states it flat out. Willpower was never the problem.
That's quite a statement, isn't it? Especially if you've struggled and felt guilty. Yeah, it really is. And he argues willpower fails not because you lack it. It fails because your biology, your emotions, those deep habit loops, they're all kind of stacked against you. So what works instead, according to Hollis, it's insight, structure, tools that meet your biology where it's at. It's about working with your body, not, fighting it constantly. For anyone who's blamed themselves, it's a total reframe. It's not about trying harder. It's about understanding better.
And that idea, understand your biology, it leads right into the emotional side of things, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Hollis is very clear. This is emotional weight as much as it is physical weight.
Yeah.
He says, look, people don't just eat because of physical hunger. We eat because we're anxious or lonely or bored or maybe overstimulated or feeling undersupported. So many reasons.
And if you connect that to the long game, that's why relapse happens so often. It's not usually because the medicine stopped working. It's because, and this is Hollis's point, no one helped them rebuild the emotional framework that food used to support. Which makes you ask, right? What happens when food, maybe your comfort, maybe part of your identity, what happens when that coping mechanism is suddenly gone? Hollis says it can feel like losing a friend. This big, unsettling silence where something really loud used to be.
Wow, losing a friend. That's powerful. And that emotional stuff, that's where shame can creep in, right? Feelings of failure. But Hollis tackles that directly. He insists, there is no shame here, only process. He says, point blank, you are not broken. You're not lazy. You're not undisciplined. Instead, he frames it like this. You're working against biology you weren't told about, and maybe a culture that, profits from confusion.
Yeah, and his take on past failures is really quite empowering. If you've tried and it didn't work out before, he tells people, good, that means you've tested what doesn't work. Now let's build what does. It just removes the blame. It shifts the focus to learning, to starting from a place of alignment, Not shame. Every attempt is just data.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk strategy, particularly the pace of weight loss. Hollis has a really strong warning here. Fast weight loss without metabolic pacing is a trap. That scale going down quickly, it feels good, sure, but it's not always this thing.
Right. He explains that if you lose weight too fast, like by really slashing calories, your body often thinks, uh-oh, famine. So it triggers survival stuff. It slows down your metabolism, how many calories you burn just resting, and it starts burning muscle instead of fat preferentially, which makes keeping the weight off later really hard.
So what's the alternative then?
Hollis focuses on pacing it right. Timing your nutrition, building habits, tracking progress in a sustainable way. The goal isn't, as he puts it, to win the race, it's to finish it. He talks about pattern mastery over perfection, not rigid rules like clean eating or cheat days. His point is, if having a slice of cake sends you spiraling back into old habits, then you haven't learned flexibility. You've basically just learned fear around food.
That makes sense. And here's something else he emphasizes, something often missed. The real work begins after the medication. He brings up the off-ramp right from the start. Because, he says, semaglutide is not forever.
Yeah, that's crucial. He paints a pretty clear picture. If there's no plan for stopping the medication, your biology just takes over again. Appetite comes back, those old triggers are still there, and the weight can rebound, sometimes quickly.
So the goal is,
The goal is to build habits that can live beyond the injections, to become, as he says, the kind of person who doesn't need weight loss as a project anymore. And that takes what he calls identity work. It's not just discipline holding the weight off, it's alignment. You know, this idea of planning the off-ramp from day one.
yeah,
It really strikes me. It shows how many approaches just focus on the during and forget the after.
absolutely. And underpinning all of this is his idea of a conversation, not a prescription. It's about the relationship. Your relationship with food, yeah, but also with your body and with the people guiding you through it. It's about giving you a map, a guide, and a community, not just a set of instructions. Now, we should probably touch on the personal side of this, Hollis's motivation. He's very open about it. He says he lived it. He was that person who couldn't lose weight, felt broken, ashamed to even ask for help. He built this whole thing, basically, so others wouldn't have to feel that isolation.
And one of the most, I think, surprising things he shares from his own experience on semaglutide was the quiet. He says, I didn't realize how loud food was in my life until the cravings were gone. That constant mental chatter just stopped. He describes this silence as unsettling and strangely beautiful.
Wow. Unsettling and beautiful. Imagine that, suddenly hearing yourself think without the food noise. So if it's not just about the scale number dropping, how does Hollis define success? What does it actually look like in his program?
Yeah, he's clear on this. Success is not by the number on the scale, but by how many coping mechanisms we've replaced with real tools. He says weight loss is a side effect of clarity. It's about rebuilding your connection to your actual hunger, to your purpose, to yourself, really.
Okay, one last thing. For anyone thinking, well, isn't using a drug like this just cheating? How does Hollis respond to that?
Oh, his answer is direct and pretty powerful. He says, if your body's biochemistry is rigged against you, using science to unrig it isn't cheating, it's adapting. And then he adds, the real cheat is pretending willpower was enough. It just completely flips that whole narrative of blame, doesn't it?
It really does.
Wow.
So this whole deep dive into Dan Hollis's approach, it really shows that lasting change, sustainable transformation, it's so much more than just a pill or an injection. It's understanding biology, yes, but also dealing with the emotional stuff and fundamentally reshaping how you relate to food and maybe even to yourself.
Right. And it leaves you with a pretty interesting thought, doesn't it? If semaglutide offers that pause button, that silence Hollis felt, what kinds of opportunities might open up in your own life? If that constant noise, cravings, anxiety, old habits, if that quiets down, what could you connect with more deeply? Your purpose, yourself, something worth thinking about, whatever your journey looks like.